Rational algebraic expressions. In this lesson, you will learn how to simplify rational algebraic expressions. We already know how to factor. Remember, when you have this polynomial, you drop down the first and last, multiply them, and list the pairs of factors. And then you choose the one that's going to add up to your middle term. And then we factor by grouping. So we're going to need to factor for some of these problems. Simplify and give the domain of the function. So we have f of a equals 5a squared plus 4a minus 1, all divided by 5a squared minus 10a minus 15. So first we're going to factor the numerator and the denominator. And then we notice we have a plus 1 in the numerator and the denominator, so those divide to give us 1. So we are left with 5a minus 1 equals 5 times the quantity of a minus 3. That is factored. Then we want to look at the domain. Well, the domain is all the possible a values. Remember that we cannot have 0 in the bottom of a fraction. We can't have a 0 as the denominator. So we look and see what is going to make the denominator 0. So we take our a minus 3 and set that equal to 0, and our a plus 1 and set that equal to 0. And then we solve for a. So our domain is all real numbers except 3 and negative 1, because those two values will give you a 0 in the denominator. Simplify and give the domain of the function. G of z equals z to the fourth minus 5z to the third plus 6z squared times the quantity of 9z minus z to the third, all to the negative 1. Well, remember that the negative 1 means we're going to bring that to the denominator. So we're going to divide this first polynomial by the second one. And in that same step, we're going to factor. So in the first polynomial, we can take out a z squared, and then it factors into z minus 2 and z minus 3. And in the second polynomial, the one that becomes the denominator, we can factor out a negative z, and then it becomes a difference of squares. So we have z minus 3 and z plus 3. Well, our z minus 3's cancel out, because z minus 3 divided by z minus 3 is 1. And then we have a z squared and a z, so one of those z's is going to cancel out. And we're left with negative z times z minus 2 all over z plus 3. So that is the answer to the simplification part. Now we're going to look at the domain. Again, the domain means you cannot have 0 on the bottom of the fraction. The domain is all the possible z values. So we set each of the factors in the denominator before we simplify. We set each of those the factors equal to 0, and then we solve those. So we have z equals 0, z equals 3, and z equals negative 3. So our domain is all real numbers except for those 3 values. All right, give the domain and zeros of the function. So this time it's already been simplified. Now we're just looking at the zeros of the function. So if we want to look at our domain, we set the denominator, the factors of the denominator equal to 0, and then we solve. So we know our domain is all real numbers except for those 3 values, 0, negative 3, and 3. And it doesn't matter what order you write those in. The zeros are what makes the numerator equal to 0. So we set the x plus 4 and the x minus 1 equal to 0. And simplify. And our zeros are negative 4 and 1. So basically the zeros are where, if we graph this, where our graph is going to cross the x-axis. Now it's your turn. Simplify and give the domain and zeros of the function. F of x equals x cubed plus 6x squared plus 9x all over x cubed minus 9x.